So the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle that she might fly into the wilderness to her place. The woman clothed with the sun is such an important character in the book of Revelation, and for those of us who love and who believe in the new church. If you turn around, you can see her picture in the very middle window of the great west window, standing for the new era, the new era that's called the new church. Now, she appears on the scene in Revelation chapter 12, not with any intention or evident intention of doing battle with some dragon, but nevertheless, the dragon is there, and he knows that if she gives birth, as she is doing, that there will no longer be room for him in that world. And so he imagines that his best option will be to put an end to the child while he is still small and weak. Now, the story that this chapter tells us is all about how the dragon's plans are foiled and how the woman is protected, how she escapes, and she finds room for herself in the wilderness. And our topic today is what this means and how this story lives on among us today, for each of us personally, and for our organization, and for the greater new church that we believe in. First of all, the child appears. And the moment the child is born, he's caught up to God and to his throne. There's no delay. He's not exposed to the dragon. The protection is absolute. There's no chase that goes on. And the reason it happens so quickly and definitely is the child is the doctrine of the new church. It's immediately secured in heaven by the angels as soon as it comes into existence, and it's invulnerable. So the story is not really about what happens to the child. Nothing can happen to the child. The drama isn't really about the child. The drama is about the woman. She's vulnerable. She is the new church itself. And from the very beginning of the story, she's struggling. Her cries of pain in giving birth, we're told, stand for the difficulty of the doctrines being accepted owing to the opposition to it by people met by the dragon. And so for the same reason, as soon as the child is born, the woman has to flee. She flees right away. And where she flees is into the wilderness, a barren and inhospitable place. And somehow she is sustained in the wilderness. It talks about her being fed there in the wilderness. And all it means is that she survives in the wilderness. What it stands for is the fact that that very few people accept this doctrine. Very few people believe what she believes, but she's sustained because there'll always be someone. It's not going to die out. There'll always be people who believe in this. And so the meaning is that the people of the church find themselves in a spiritual landscape where people have falsified, or they no longer believe the truths that they have, or they have no truths at all, and they're not interested in learning them. Now, the story, curiously, gives the impression that the wilderness is somehow a safe place for the woman, because she escapes there. But it's not a safe place at all. She's still in danger from the dragon. Her environment offers her no protection, and yet she does find safety. And how this happens is our topic today. So how is it that she is in a place prepared by God that they should feed her there, even though she's in a wilderness? And the answer is given in the events that immediately follow. And they describe not only what happens to her, but what can happen in our own lives and in the communities of those who believe in and who love and pray for the new church. So the first thing is that the moment she makes her escape, the dragon is attacked. And he cannot pursue her. Michael and his angels fight with him, and we are told there is war in heaven. And the writings explain that Michael is not an individual archangel, but he stands for a ministry of those in heaven who believe in and follow the Lord. And interestingly, we are told in the writings that, quote, those who are Michael were chiefly from the ancient heavens. They have all remained in existence and were from them in those heavens who were from pagan peoples and from children from everywhere, now adults. So that's curious that these were ancient peoples, at least initially. So they have this war, and of course, wars in heaven are not fought with weapons, but are contests between falsity and truth. And there aren't really ever actually wars in heaven, since falsities can't even exist there. But the war described here is about what kind of ideas belong in heaven and what kind of ideas don't belong in heaven. And since they're fighting about this, it would make sense that the wisdom of these ancient peoples would come into play, since the state of Christianity was so weak. Over time, however, it seems that the Michaels were increasingly from Christians, because later they are described that way. So Michael and his angels defeat the dragon, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. That is, the things taught by the dragon are shown to be untrue. They don't belong in heaven. And it would be nice to think that the matter would end there, that the woman is now safe because the dragon has been defeated. But the dragon's downfall means only that she's removed from heaven. Michael does not, for some reason, follow the dragon down to earth to protect the woman, but she has other means of protection. And here is where the story kind of becomes more interesting for those of us who believe in and love this new church. First of all, being thrown down to earth seems to have only made the dragon more angry. And once there, he pursues the woman. And she is then defended in two specific ways. The first way she's defended is with wings. She's given wings. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time. And that amount of time is the same amount of time as 1,260 days mentioned earlier, which means until the end of this age and the beginning of the next age. Not a very helpful amount of time, but that's what we're taught. Now, according to the Apocalypse Revealed, these wings stand for this. They stand for the divine circumspection on behalf of the new church and its protection while it is still among a few. And in a sense, this doesn't seem to be saying very much, other than that the Lord is watching over his church, as you would expect him to do. But there's really more to it. The eagle and his wings stand for the Lord's power, his keen sight and understanding. He perceives and guards against whatever is harmful in that wilderness where so few people agree with the teachings of the new church. Now, Apocalypse Explained has a slightly different and complementary interpretation. And we're fortunate to have both the Apocalypse Revealed and the Apocalypse Explained, explaining the same things with their slightly different interpretations. So Apocalypse Explained was written first. It is 6 volumes that ends sort of mysteriously in Revelation chapter 20 out of 22. So it was never finished. And it was never published, even though up to the point where Swedenborg stops, it was prepared for publication. And then after that was done, a couple of years later, Apocalypse Revealed was written in 2 volumes and published. It's shorter, it's more direct, whereas Apocalypse Explained has long descriptions that bring in passages from many parts of the Word, which is one reason it's so valuable. Apocalypse Revealed does not include that many things. And yet the 2 works say basically the same thing. They don't disagree with each other, but there are differences. And the meaning of the 2 wings is a good example of the kind of differences there are. So here's what Apocalypse Explained, the longer one that wasn't published, says. It says, the 2 wings of the great eagle signify spiritual intelligence and circumspection, which the Lord gives to those who are of that church. So whereas Apocalypse Revealed talks about the Lord's circumspection on behalf of the church, Apocalypse Explained talks about how he gives this circumspection and intelligence to the people themselves. It really amounts to the same thing, since the wisdom is really his. But whereas the first assures us of the Lord's protection, the second reminds us that this reliance on the Lord involves using the tools that he gives us. So, how can the new church survive in a world where so few seem to love its teachings? On the one hand, according to Apocalypse Revealed, those who love the new church shouldn't be anxious. The Lord is continually working to prepare the world to receive these doctrines meant by the woman's child. The greater cultural movements of humanity inevitably point, therefore, towards the new spiritual era that the writings call the new church. So things like the spread of technology, the spread of education, and the access to information that people have, many other things are things that actually move in that direction. And even though it may not seem this way, and it doesn't seem this way to so many of us, the world actually is continually getting more peaceful, it's getting less violent, it is actually less prone to hunger and disease, and Christianity continues to grow rapidly. Now, it seems to us just the opposite because that's what we hear on the news, but what this really means is we're just more sensitive to those things, and we have more ability to find out about them. But if you look into it, you will see that it's all really moving in a good direction, and it gets better, and it gets worse, gets better, and it gets worse. But over hundreds of years, the movement with regard to those kind of things is positive. And the factors that are guiding these enormous movements of humanity, they're so complex and they're so subtle that only the Lord can be making them happen. And this is the Lord's guidance. And this is the main thing. But on the other hand, we have Apocalypse Explained saying it's wisdom and circumspection that the Lord gives to the people who are of the church. And this means that those who love the new church should do everything they can to intelligently guide the organizations that promote this church in this world. I mean, there are always cultural trends that present threats to true Christianity and true spirituality. And these threats need to be seen. They need to be understood. They need to be defended against. Church organizations such as ours need to use their best judgment to say, well, what is the best policy here? What's the best strategy here? How can we, keep this safe and help it to grow? So both of these things are meant by the wings. And that's why wings are so often mentioned in the Word as means for protection. The Lord says in Moses, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself from Exodus. And from Deuteronomy, he says, as an eagle stirs up its nest, hovers over its young, spreading out its wings, taking them up, carrying them on its wings, so the Lord alone led Israel. And in the Psalms, David says, he shall cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you shall take refuge. You know, the wings don't seem to be, or feathers don't seem to be powerful. But ultimately, these soft and beautiful things stand for the power and the protection of the Lord's love. So she had these wings, but it's not so easy to escape from the dragon. Undaunted, he continues to come after her. This time what he does is he spews water out of his mouth like a flood, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. And the dragon's flood then activates the second form of protection in the story. We read, but the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. And here again, the Apocalypse Revealed and Apocalypse Explained have different but complementary explanations. Apocalypse Revealed puts it this way. This symbolically means that the multitude of reasonings flowing from falsities that the followers of the dragon put forward come to nothing in the face of the spiritual truths rationally understood that are advanced by the Michaels of whom the new church is formed. The spiritual truths rationally understood, advanced by the Michaels. So the flood is a flood of false ideas. And the earth, helping the woman, refers to the fact that the doctrine of the new church has answers to every one of them. The doctrines of the new church have answers to every one of them. The Michaels here, just as they did before, are able to use these spiritual truths, rationally understood, to defend the new church from these often confusing assaults and accusations. And the Apocalypse Explained has a slightly different explanation, which is that there are, quote, those who are of the church that is not in truths, who afforded assistance and did not receive the crafty reasonings of those who were in faith separated from charity. That is, there are people all over the world of many different religions who don't buy into the false and harmful ideas that the dragon is continually disseminating. Ordinary people often don't understand the sophisticated justifications of harmful practices that scholars and the media often promote. They rely on common sense, and often they can end up helping the woman, swallowing up the flood. So the new church is protected by people of many different beliefs who, in one way or another, resist the flood that's produced by the dragon. Now, the point of both explanations, though, ends up being the same, which is that there are answers to the dragon's flood. We're not victims. It's important for people to know these answers and to have the wherewithal to avoid falling for the dragon's appealing and seemingly sensible, but ultimately harmful and hateful ideas. So all of these factors come together to protect the woman clothed to the sun. She survives. And interestingly, after this story, she's not spoken of again, although we often think of her as returning as the holy city, New Jerusalem, in chapter 21. And the dragon continues to make war on the rest of her offspring until he is locked in the bottomless pit in chapter 20. So this story is about the protection of the new church while it is still among a few, and it's very relevant to those of us who love this new church and who identify with the organizations and churches that believe in and follow its teachings. The Lord gives this church wings, and he provides for the dragon's flood to be swallowed up. The wings lifted up to see the means for its protection, even as the Lord guides world events and trends in ways that are beyond our understanding. And the flood is swallowed up by the spiritual truths, rationally understood, that answer these false ideas, while other factors lead people worldwide to resist those same ideas. So these are some of the things that we celebrate as we look forward to June 19th, 2 weeks from today. This is part of the story of the descent of the holy city, New Jerusalem, and the peace that it is bringing to the world. We close with Psalm 61. O Lord, I will abide in your tabernacle forever. I will trust in the shelter of your wings. Amen.